Join us today because we want to talk about the glory of God in missions, and particularly the glory of God in the mission that's unfolding in Guatemala. Something quite spectacular. I'm going to show you some pictures, and you're going to even learn how to sign up to receive text updates as we go from one country to another for the glory of God in missions.
Well, John, it's good to see you back here in the good old U.S. of A. Glad to have you back on U.S. time.
Yeah, it's always good to come back after you've been on an adventure, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, last week, John, I was doing this recording solo. I was by myself, and the reason I was talking on the topic of missions and kind of the biblical foundation of missions, and the reason I was all doing that all by myself is because I didn't have you as a, kind of like to prop me up as a crutch. I had to stand on my own 2 feet on missions, but I was glad to know that you were out on the mission field doing what we were talking about that day. You were in
That's right.
Guatemala first, and then you went over to El Salvador. But
Yes.
I understand today we're just going to focus in a little bit on your time in Guatemala and the exciting things that happened there.
Yeah, the glory of missions is to go to a place like Guatemala and see God work in powerful ways. And that's what I want to share with our folks today, is what God is doing in Guatemala through those who are involved with PassionLife all over the world. But what we saw in Guatemala was very, very, very special. So.
Wow. Yeah, so now I've never been to Guatemala personally, John. I was supposed to have gone there with you in 2020. We'll get to that in a minute. But this was your first trip to Guatemala?
This was my first trip since COVID, going to Guatemala.
Wow. Okay.
Actually, let me stand corrected.
Okay.
We were in Guatemala to actually meet with the president of Guatemala, who
right.
a couple of years ago dedicated a monument to pledge Guatemala to be the pro-life capital of Iberia or Latin America. So that was kind of a special ceremonial event.
Okay.
But this is the first time we've been able to do our work, our mission in a place like Guatemala.
Okay, and that was during COVID. Is that correct that you guys were there? I mean, like kind of post-COVID when the travel started to open up again. You guys, if I remember correctly, there were masks and things in the pictures last time you went to Guatemala.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, well, Guatemala, for those who are following along, is kind of, if you're traveling down from North America and through Mexico, Guatemala would be the first Central American country you would come to out of Mexico. Mm-hmm. It shares a border with Mexico. And then right below Guatemala is El Salvador, where you went next. But Guatemala is, I think you said it's about the same landmass as the state of Tennessee. So,
that's right. That's a good way for people to kind of get a sense of where it is and how big it is, about the size of Tennessee. And then, of course, El Salvador, which we also visited, is about a third of that size. So more like, I don't know, Rhode Island or something like that.
Something like that, right.
Yeah.
But even though Guatemala has a landmass the size of Tennessee has about 7 million people that live in it. And Guatemala has about a population of about 18 million, from what I understand. So much more densely populated, not as agricultural and spread out as parts of Tennessee are. But it helps people kind of frame what we're talking about.
That's right. It's a beautiful country. Obviously, most of the people live in Guatemala City, which is the capital. But it's a beautiful, beautiful, lush, mountainous green country. So is El Salvador. But this picture here of the city, standing in the street in the city, looking up at this volcano is quite stunning. I was actually on that very street and kind of find my bearings around the city by looking for where the volcano is. But it just kind of shows you what a beautiful country it is. In some places, you could even see the steam kind of rising up through these volcanoes. So they're still very active.
If I remember correctly, in 2020, you and I were about to go to Guatemala together. We were invited by the same people who invited you this time. And I think we were going to be taking Jeannie and Anderson, who is our colleague from Medellin, Colombia. and we were going to be going there together to train 500 pastors, and we were really kind of stoked about the opportunity. The inviting pastor was Pastor Solares. What's his name? Fernando Solares?
Yes, yes. Here's a picture of Fernando Solares I took last week. He's 81 years old. He's the one who has pioneered Christian TV and radio in Guatemala in this huge and social media. But we were supposed to go there in 2020. In fact, I had all my bags packed. If you remember, in March of 2020 is when all the planes stopped.
Yeah, it was March of 2020. We were going to have 500 pastors there, largely because he, being in TV and radio, is a very, very well-known pastor. He's very well respected. And he had invited all these pastors to come and hear the training of the 4 questions. And then I think it was like 2 days before we were supposed to go, all the planes shut down and we weren't able to leave the country for a couple of years. But finally, that opportunity came back around, huh? So
it did. It came back earlier this year, and I'm telling you, this guy Fernando Solares is not going to be a household name here in the States, but in Guatemala he is a household name, and he's a man just has a powerful testimony. He wasn't converted until he was in his 40s,
wow,
and yet today in his 80s, he just is full of a sense of the grace of God and the power of God at work through all the years of his life and through this ministry. And he invited us to come back, and he asked if I would come and join him down there. And so I made that a priority for myself to be there with him. So we went down there last week, and here's our team, actually, with Fernando.
We have four PassionLife members.
Jeannie, Fernando, myself, and then we've got our two colleagues from Colombia, Anderson and Nadu.
Right.
And we were able to just kind of interact and teach, kind of like a tag team throughout the day with the people who gathered with us.
And it wasn't just, I think they told you there might be 400 people there. Last time we were supposed to go, they were saying 500, but when you got there, what did you find?
So we got down there and we found out that that almost 1,000 people had registered now to come to this event. And in fact, they had to advertise no more registrations because the facility couldn't hold more than 1,100 people. And so that was quite a shock. And we had about 800 people that actually showed up. So there was some shrinkage, but I think by far this is the largest group of pastors or ministry leaders that we've ever taught at one time. And part of me likes teaching groups of more like 50 or 60 because you can get them to be much more interactive. 800 people, you have to train in a completely different way. So we were kind of adjusting on the fly here, but it was still, how can you not be excited that so many people would respond to Pastor Fernando's call to the leaders of Guatemala to come and let us ask biblical questions about the moral crisis of abortion and what God wants us to do about it.
Well, it looks like they were well prepared. Did they print these versions of the 4 questions that these guys are holding up before you got there and had them ready to pass out to people?
Yeah, they had this little booklet in Spanish called the 4 Preguntas.
Yeah, the 4 questions.
The 4 questions.
And did this have
in pamphlet size? So everything was in there. They had another little notebook for them to take notes on.
Very nice.
Very, very well organized. And because we were dealing with TV stations and radio, they were video taping. They were sending out clips on Facebook and different social media things all day long, and generating a further response throughout the country. So.
Well, it looks, that looks like what they were doing was they were preparing for it to not just be a one-day event. They were preparing for the people to be able to take that material, write it down, study it well, be able to look back at their notes and go out and train other people, which is obviously that's the bedrock of everything that PassionLife does, is we want it to be reproducible so that it carries on and there's momentum.
if you're new to Passion Life, you will soon discover that our DNA is not to go out and teach people biblical content, but rather to teach people how to teach biblical content. And so it's a little bit of a different angle, because we want everything that we teach to be reproduced in another group of pastors and leaders, starting within 2 weeks. And then those pastors, along with the original team, will agree to teach their church people. And then we don't even stop there. We challenge these original pastors to challenge their people to go out and share the 4 questions, either in the same sort of booklet Bible study or in a video format with another 10 people within the next 7 days. So you get this rapidly reproducing movement of rescuers, an army of rescuers that can be generated in a country like Guatemala. And this particular time, as you can see, Anderson and I are standing there teaching, and there's quite a crowd there listening. And then we try to break them up.
Anderson is translating for you, is that right? Into Spanish?
Well, he's translating for me because my Spanish is no good. But honestly, we're at a point now, because again, we're making disciples.
That's right.
Where my being there does bring more people in, because the famous author, the
You're
American,
the
whatever.
That's right. The writer.
That's right. Yeah, the writer. Okay, so that they feature me, but my goal is for them to really connect with Anderson, who is Latin American, from Colombia, to start to see him as their leader. And so I will get up and speak briefly, and then try to hand things back over to Anderson to do the bulk of the teaching, along with Jeannie and others who are Spanish speakers. That way they're not having to listen all day to me, or just through translation.
And this picture makes it look like you were able to get, even with 800 leaders there, you were able to get people to kind of break out a little bit and have small group discussions during the training, and talk to their neighbor and share with each other. And
Exactly. Because again, we Americans, we tend to go to places and we have the person who's the expert who teaches, and we're passively listening.
Right.
And it's all content driven. But we want to teach content, and then we want to build people's confidence that they can say, hey, I can teach this. Maybe not as good as John, because John spends his whole life teaching this, but I can teach it well enough to make my people into lovers of their pregnant neighbors and an army of rescuers. So we get them into small groups. Even with 800, we get them talking to each other about this case study. How would they respond? What did they learn about a woman or a couple that's in crisis? And here they're meeting in their rows, 3, 4, 5 people, looking at the scriptures, basically beginning to train each other back and forth. And that's going to build their confidence up by the end of the day.
That's right. And then you're handing them physical material that they can use as teaching material. And in this picture, I guess you've got this lady looking at this little fetal model that we pass out, or what we call the Passion Life Tiny Baby. She's obviously studying the detail there. You can see the wheels turning in her mind, like she's looking at this thing saying, okay, look how much detail, look how well developed. How can I use this to apply the biblical teaching to help people understand, the medical reality of life in the womb? Yeah.
That's exactly it. Question 1 of our 4 questions is, what does God say about human life, including life in the womb? And we talk about the value of human life being made in the image of God. And we try to answer the question, when does human life begin according to the Bible and according to science? So after we show them that both of them teach that human life begins at conception, we want to hand out an actual fetal model. And I could have shown you another half a dozen pictures of,
I'm sure,
kind of the wow moment where people are just stunned, and they're staring at the baby, and you can just see, like you said, the wheels are turning, and the truth is starting to solidify in their mind and their heart.
Everybody got one of these models?
Yes, we had thousands of them there. And not only do we want to give everybody a model, but we want to give them some to take and pass out to the people that they're going to teach.
Okay.
So in theory, we go back there, we could probably take a 500,000 to 1 million of fetal models with us.
Yes. So you're prepared. Again, this is just another situation where you are prepared for the people to not just hear what they're being taught, but then to go out and do the exact same thing with another group of people so that the message continues to travel.
That's right. And with that little fetal model in their pocket or their purse, not only do they have something to show people, but when they meet someone in crisis, they have something to begin a conversation around about the humanity of that unborn child, which is the moral crisis of abortion.
Wow, that's exciting. Why don't we take a break, John, and we'll come back and we'll talk about the response, how the people responded and what they want to do going forward. Does that sound good?
Amen. Yes, that's great.
The U.S. accounts for only 3% of the abortions that happen in our world each year, leaving 97% of the crisis before us as a world missions challenge. Would you join us in serving where the need is greatest? PassionLife, rescuing the most vulnerable where abortion is most concentrated.
We've received a really overwhelming and wonderful response to this tiny baby fetal model that we've developed here in PassionLife. This fetal model is a medically accurate representation from the 9th week after conception. If you go to our website, we've got a way for you to not only send those tiny babies around the world, but find out a way that you can have some of those tiny babies come to you for your own use as well. The data says an unplanned or an unwanted pregnancy is the most common crisis among humans. Every country, every kind of people can find themselves pregnant when they didn't mean to be or they didn't want to be. And all over the world, Christians are coming together and organizing to help. Christians are the best opportunity for bringing change to a community. They're trying to answer the biblical call of Proverbs 24:11. How do we rescue the most vulnerable? This is why we start with churches and why we start with pastors and why we start with the Bible. We don't just come to Mexico and teach people to save babies. We teach people to obey the Word of God. This is what I want you to do. Pray, study the Bible, and let love tell you how to respond. Look for the women in your community and figure out how you can help them. This is my challenge to you, and it's not difficult. It will grow the faith of everyone in your church. You start bringing pregnant women in those doors, and everybody will want to help take care of them. And you will be obeying the call of God to rescue the innocent. Well, John, it's really delightful to me just to picture a room with like 800 pastors and leaders in it, looking at this little fetal model and hearing these wonderful Bible passages about the value and the dignity of human life and just rejoicing over it. Yeah. That's really fun. Yeah. It's not all fun and rejoicing in the 4 questions training. It looks like this from this next picture that there's a little bit of weeping and repenting that goes along with the 4 questions training as well.
More than a little, Mark. More than a little. This is the moment in the training in which you are really required to expose the evil truth about what abortion is. Yeah. We start with the biblical language of the shedding of innocent blood. We talk a little bit about child sacrifice as it's described in the Old Testament, and we lay it to abortion today. And you can see from the response there's a great amount of weeping and lamenting that takes place during this time. Some people are weeping over their own experience now that it's been exposed. Others are weeping because they recognize that they have never said anything. They've never led well on this painful reality. And others are just sort of grieving in general that they live in a time of child sacrifice today in which so many innocent babies are being intentionally killed. So it's a time of genuine grieving, but it's in that moment where the resolve starts to be born to do something about it. It's a very powerful moment.
I've heard you say it's like sharing the gospel and getting to the problem, which is that there is a sin problem and that people are in need of being saved from the wrath of God. It's not easy for people to hear, but once that part comes, then it produces. That's where the fruit comes from. It's from the exposure of the sin and the wrong.
And it sets up question 3 for us, which is to bring the grace of the gospel to the guilt and the grief of abortion. And so here we have in this next picture, we have our beautiful Jeannie Pernia, who travels all over the world basically to share her story about her own involvement with the abortion industry, her own experience with abortion and the trauma that followed it, and how she came to taste and see that the Lord is good. How he washed her conscience clean and turned her secret into a literal testimony. And it's the gospel, and people begin to buy into it. They begin to celebrate it. They begin to see in her life how much God has done for her. And that gives everybody hope going forward.
Jeannie's story is powerful and amazing, and I've heard it. She's an American. She lives in Florida, but she's a Spanish speaker, and I've heard her give her testimony in both English and Spanish, and she really seems to just feel most comfortable in Spanish, if you ask me. I bet she was great in Guatemala to watch.
She just lays out her story and gives God the glory for coming in, and it's not a momentary thing. It comes in steps. She came to the Lord, but this deep, dark secret about her past was still there. As in many cases, many people watching this right now have abortion in their past, and it's still a deep, deep, dark secret. And so it's a moment where God says, I'm done with that. I'm going to clean you out. I'm going to set you free. And that begins through confession and understanding the blood of Christ is also the shedding of innocent blood that can wash away the shedding of innocent blood. And it gives people the freedom now to know that they're not hypocrites when they go out and teach the 4 questions. Again, they're being restored. They're being set free to serve him. And then we just begin to close our time together with the question 4, which is to rescue the innocent. And as we end with that, we invite the leaders and the pastors to publicly declare who else in their circle of influence are they willing to teach these 4 questions to, starting immediately, within the next 2 weeks. And some people have two other pastors in their hometown. Some people are overseeing a network of churches, so they might say, I have 35 pastors that I can teach this to. And so the retraining multiplication process begins to be accounted for.
And you were intentional about this time, and we had a new tool in our toolbox on this particular trip. Christian Harris, who is our operations manager, kind of created an app or a real-time tracking tool that people were able to use their phones. And you were asking these questions. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, you've heard the 4 questions. How many pastors or leaders can you train? And then what were the other questions that you were having them feed back in this app?
Yeah, so if you're looking at the numbers here, they're in Spanish. So the first one is the leaders that are with us today. That's the 800 that we started with. Yep. And then we invited them to go online and put in a number for the number of other leaders or pastors that they would teach. And it turns out to be about 8 per person, but 800 then is going to go out and teach 6,769 other pastors and leaders starting within the next 2 weeks. Now, from that point on, we start to use estimates. Okay?
Estimates, of course.
And we estimate that if all of those pastors and leaders agree, along with the original 800, to teach the members of their church, you could average about 50 per church. So some will be 200, but some will might be 25, that kind of thing. Right. And if they all teach, that's another 378,000 people that are now learning the 4 questions.
It's unbelievable.
And then we're not done.
Okay.
Because we know that in a movement, if a pastor challenges his people to go out and share these 4 questions as a Bible study or in the video format that we make available with 10 other people, in the next 7 days, that about 25% of the people will agree to that and go out and do it. They just bring a bunch of people over to their home and then watch the video, or if they're doing a home study or something like that, they'll begin the 4 questions over the next 4 weeks or something like that. And then the number really explodes. And they ended up starting with 800 pastors and leaders, and they basically committed to try to reach 1.3 million people over the next couple of months with the biblical call to rescue the innocent, and to do so one mother and couple at a time.
That is an astounding number, and it's not the numbers that I think are the most astounding thing. It's because we don't know. We don't know if they're going to follow through, and who knows? They may reach many more than that. But that's not the important thing. The important thing is that these guys are committing to not letting it end today. They want to go on and they want to reach as many people with this message as possible, because in one day they were heavily impacted by it. That's right.
That's right. And true learning isn't just an intellectual understanding. True learning is knowledge. You know, it's knowing by true experience and sharing that experience with others.
Right.
So we want to see it rapidly reproduce. It might drag out over 6 months. We don't know. We have set in place so that these 800 leaders can report back to a designated person how many people they ended up training. So we can do a little bit of tracking. And after that, we're trying to do a good faith estimate.
Good faith.
That's
right.
But the reality is, like you say, Mark, even if they fail by 50%, okay,
yeah.
Now you're talking, what, 700,000 people being trained in the scriptures and being shown how to promote the gospel as the cleansing, forgiving power that starts a new life.
It's astounding. And may it be, and may we need to be in prayer. I guess this picture of you with one of the pastors, is that right? Who's committing himself and...
Yeah, this is a key pastor in the group. And they all came forward to stand at the stage. It's kind of a solemn moment where they were basically resolving and praying and pledging themselves. They all were stunned by the numbers because it happened in real time. They could see the numbers adding up. So then they came forward and they were given fetal models to go back and use when they train. They were given some thumb drives with the information that they needed and the videos that they needed. A couple other organizing things. And then there's moment of prayer where they just dedicated themselves and saying, Lord, help us be faithful now in what we've just committed to. So it's not works righteousness, it's by God's grace and by God's power. With your help, oh Lord, we want to do this. And it's a beautiful moment of resolve. And then after this, people just want to hang around and visit and talk.
Yeah, well, you sent that text. You sent that very chart of 1.3 million people right as I was going into a small home group of people, I think on Monday night, to talk about the vision and the mission of Passion Life. And I was just sharing with them who we are and what our DNA is, kind of introducing them, kind of a fundraiser, friend raiser type of event. And just like 2 hours before I went in there, here comes your chart of all these leaders. 800 leaders pledged to train 6,700 pastors. Final goal, train 1.3 million people. The impact of that in real time is amazing. People should sign up for our text updates on our website. If you haven't done that, go to passionlife.org and sign up for real-time updates as we go into the next countries that Passion Life is going into the fall.
You'll not regret it.